Hare Krishna, I have come to Bengal here in India on pilgrimage with 12 devotees to visit a very sacred place called Vishnupur. Vishnupur is a city here in Bengal, part of a greater area known as Vana Vishnupur. Vana means, of course, forest, like we have Vrindavan. So previously this was a forested area, you could even say like a jungle. History goes way back. There was one king 49 generations ago who was given a beautiful deity of Krishna, Vrindavan Mohan. And that deity has been worshipped here, well, that many generations back. But around 450 years ago, the king of this city was King Bharamvira. He was an interesting personality, ruled with an iron hand. When there were criminals and thieves in prison, he often sacrificed them to the goddess Kali. He would engage in human sacrifices. Other things he did as well, but we don't have time for that. But you can imagine what type of a king he was. But interestingly enough, he was very attached to hearing Shrimad-Bhagavatam. So one day his astrologer came to him and said, "Your Royal Highness, I can predict that very soon a very, very valuable treasure will be passing by our kingdom. I recommend you send your soldiers and get that priceless treasure." So it just so happened that Jiva Goswami in Vrindavan, he had a tola, he had a school. Many of you know, 3 very illustrious personalities graduated from that school: Narottam Das Thakur, Srinivasacharya, and Shyamananda Pandit. So after educating them in the Bhakti Shastras, he requested them, as you could say, to repay the transcendental debt, to take the original books of the Goswamis to Bengal. Because at that time in our Gaudiya history, Vaishnavas were living in Vrindavan and Vaishnavas were living in Bengal because of the appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So the Goswamis, they wrote their books in Vrindavan. So all the original copies, Bhakti Rasamrita, Sindhu, Brihad Bhagavatamrita, etc., Chaitanya Charitamrita, they were all written in Vrindavan, or they were there in Vrindavan. And Jiva Goswami wanted them sent here to Bengal to be copied for the pleasure of the devotees here. So Srinivas, Narottam, and Shyamananda, they came by bullock cart all the way across India. We were just passing a bullock cart. It was moving very slow. So it took time. They stopped here. This is about 250 kilometers from Navadvip. They stopped for the night and they took rest under a banyan tree, and they all 3 fell asleep. And at that moment, at that time, the soldiers of King Bharamvira, they came and stole the books. And you can imagine how these young men, these great devotees, how disturbed they were when they woke up and saw all the original books were gone. They weren't copied yet. They were like, it was unbelievable how they were feeling. So they had to go and find them. But Srinivas, who was the leader of the party, he said, I'll look for the books. I'll find them. So Shyamananda, you go to Orissa, continue preaching. In Narottam, you go to Kaituri, which is now, well, it's Bangladesh now, it was East Bengal, and you preach in your hometown there. To make a long story short, Srinivasacharya was searching. He came here to Vishnupur, to the kingdom of Birambir, and he happened to come in the morning when King Birambir was engaged in one of his most pleasurable activities, hearing Shrimad-Bhagavatam. But the speaker that day had a tinge of Mayavad philosophy when he was giving the Bhagavatam class. Srinivasacharya arrived at that moment. He came in the hall and he heard this personality speaking with the tinge of Mayavad. So he spoke up. He said, no, you are not correct. This is rascaldom. You're preaching impersonalism. Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, etc. Disrupted the whole meeting. Such a strong devotee he was. So King Birambir, he said, so you think you know more? So very humbly, Srinivasacharya said, yes, I have the mercy of my gurus. So he said, you speak. So Srinivasacharya got on the Vyasasan and he gave a beautiful, very deep class on bhakti, on Braj Bhaktis, completely defeating the Mayavad philosophy. The king was so impressed by that one lecture, just these few moments of association with the pure devotee. He got off his throne, he came and he paid full obeisances to Srinivasacharya. Not only that, at that very moment, he asked to be his disciple. So some days later, Srinivasacharya initiated King Birambir and his wife and his children, and as time went on the order of King Birambir, who stopped the human sacrifices, by the way, the whole kingdom became Krishna conscious. So King Birambir, he so much adored his guru Srinivasacharya, he wanted to serve him as best he could. So Srinivasacharya, he came up with the idea that we could turn Vishnupur, which was in many ways a holy place already, there are many temples, but into a Gaudiya Vaishnav city. So Srinivasacharya and King Birambir, they traveled all the way to Vrindavan. And there King Birambir, under the guidance of Srinivasacharya, he was able to see what Vrindavan actually looked like on this earth, where the temples were, where the Jamuna was, where Giriraj Govardhan, Varshana, etc. He learned everything about Vrindavan with the idea that they would come back and establish Vrindavan here in Vishnupur. So that's what happened. Many of the temples you see in this video were established by King Birambir or his descendants, and the original deity that the first king 49 generations ago who was worshiping, that's the main deity here. And he's in an ancient temple. Actually, most of the temples over the last 450 years, the deities have been removed. Actually, I went to one home, descendants of the pujaris in those days, where many of those deities are being worshipped in that home. But Madan Mohan, Shri Radha Madan Mohan, they're worshipping one of the original, most exquisite terracotta. This is the material they use, terracotta temples. And King Birambir established a very interesting policy that he built this huge temple with, you could say, many little altars, quite significant altar rooms. And once a year on Ras Purnima, he would invite all the deities in the city, in the surrounding areas, these ancient deities, to come and be worshipped in those individual temples in this big temple. I counted about 200 altars, maybe 300 altars in that one temple. So during the Ras Purnim festival every year, which they were strictly following under the advice or the instructions of Srinivasacharya, through time, all these deities would come into this one temple, all the different villages and towns. They'd have a 4 or 5 day festival. Pilgrims would come and they could circumambulate all those deities in one day and see their worship. What a wonderful Rajarishis we had before. Rajarishi means a saintly person sitting on the throne. He could administrate, he could do what was necessary to provide the material necessities and government for a city, but he was a saintly person. So King Biramir was transformed by Srinivasacharya. So here we are, visiting all these old temples, 500 years old, and the various deities and the saintly pujaris who are worshiping them. You feel the mood here. It's a Gupta Vrindavan. It's actually a hidden Vrindavan. And as part of the bliss of being here, we're doing programs as well. In the evening, where people are gathering. Last night we had 2,000 people. Bengalis here are very pious. The mood here is very, very, very sweet. I gave a lecture sharing with them how their culture, the culture of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is being spread all over the world by His divine grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we had this rousing kirtan for 90 minutes. It was amazing to be chanting and dancing with the people of Vishnupur and their surrounding areas. And we have another program tonight, and the next night we're combining preaching with a special opportunity to see these deities. I took darshan just the other day of the deities of Gaur-Nitai, installed by Srinivasacharya himself. My hair was almost standing on end, not due to ecstasy, but just excitement to have darshan of the very deities of Gaur-Nitai installed by Srinivasacharya. I prayed to them to be able to continue serving their mission, the mission of my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, to empower me to be able to speak in such a way as to affect people's hearts and to keep me in their hearts. We had darshan with Hemalata Goswamini, who was the daughter of Srinivasacharya, a great devotee in our line. Her deities are Sri Sri Radharaman. They're in the area here. We were actually just walking down the street, and the pujari noticed us and asked us if we wanted to come in. Those deities travel throughout the year to different homes, pious Bengali homes or devotees' homes. They're 10 days here, 10 days there, 10 days there. Somehow, by Krishna's arrangement, we walked by at the right time, and the pujari noticed, invited us, and so we sat before the deities of Hemalata Goswamini. And we prayed to her deities as well. So this is the real adventure, the adventure of Krishna consciousness, all by the mercy of my beloved spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.